Hello and welcome to the NTI PodTalk. My name is Dianne and I'm Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. Join me as I talk to interesting people in the field of health and wellness, food and farming, and anywhere else we find conversations that matter to our community. By listening, you'll learn a little about NTI and a lot about the things and people around you that make a difference for your wellness. Welcome, and let's get started. Hello there. Welcome back to another edition of the NTI PodTalk. This is Dianne Kaler, Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. And I am so happy today to be talking to Dustin Strong, who has a really interesting topic to talk about, something that we have not talked about before on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Dustin, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so delighted to be here.
Thanks. All right, well, let's jump in and a very typical question. Tell us about what got you interested in the field of health and wellness. Did you start out in this field? What's your journey?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's been a lot of nudgings into this direction my whole life. So it's been definitely aligned with my purpose. But if I were to give you the beginning story, the original, I moved around a lot as a child, and in one summer, wound up just spending a lot more time indoors than I think would have been healthy for me, and gained a lot of weight. And when I went back to school that year, I didn't realize it really, but we had to run down this road and back. And as we're running, the kid who I perceived as being the heavy kid in class, because remember, there was only one when we were younger.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He passed me like I was standing still. And I looked down and I realized, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've become the heavy kid. And I didn't, it just snuck up on me, and it just gave me this experience early on and an appreciation for what it takes to get truly healthy. And so I wound up spending more time in the library, and I came across a book called The Sugar Blues by William H. Duffy. And something in my brain just switched, and I just gave up sugar, and the experience I had giving up sugar changed everything for me. I mean, I became a better student. I definitely lost the weight. I just, everything seemed to get better globally in my life. And so that brought my attention to food in a powerful way that I hadn't done before. I had a lot of great, influences that really were, guiding me towards food as medicine. But I think also when I finally went to undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin, I went to a nutrition course. I sat in the front row, and I found myself in absolute disagreement with what was being taught, because they were talking about sugar so much being good for babies. And of course, we've come to find out later on that the information that was being taught was accepted from, the science. And then that science was funded by the sugar industry. As we've learned, there were 3 Harvard scientists paid off. So it made me step back and start questioning everything, about health, and learning to trust but verify. But when it comes to mental health, so I became, much more interested in nutrition. I unfortunately had some very close people in my family, my grandmother and my uncle, who were prescribed medication over the phone for mental health before there was a warning on it, and they took their lives. So that was there's no louder wake up call than that. And that really pushed me to truly dive into understanding what these drugs are doing in the body, and if there's a possibility that we can achieve a superior result with nutrition, why aren't we doing that? And that has become an absolute truth that I've discovered. And if I could ring a bell and make everybody listen to me for 5 minutes, that's what I would say. It's like, here we can do this better without the risks, and everything gets better when you correct the nutrition, as opposed to just trying to fixate on one thing. I hope that distilled it down for you.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Yeah, so I when I went to college, I did not go for nutrition. I didn't have really any interest in nutrition, but I did take a, nutrition 101, because the college that I went to, the university that I went to was one of the, primary schools for registered dietitians. And so there was a big nutrition program on campus. And so I took, Nutrition 101 because I thought it would be an easy elective. I needed the hours, right? Thought it'd be an easy elective. And I was not astute enough at, age, whatever it was, 19 or 20, to recognize the problems with the advice that was being, the information that was being delivered in that, in the whatever, it was the early 80s, mid 80s. And it turned me off. I was like, oh my God, this is so boring. And so like, and meanwhile, the professors, they've got a can of soda on their, it's a giant lecture hall with, 100 and 200 some students. And, you can see down on their desk, they've got a can of soda and, a package of some kind of packaged food, all this kind of stuff. And it was like, what? I don't understand what the point of this is, right? I mean, I didn't really know anything, but I didn't understand what the point was, because it was pretty much just counting calories and counting grams of, macronutrients. So I similarly got turned off, but for a different reason than you, because I was not astute enough to realize that a lot of this was propaganda.
Also, what's interesting is, there is something inside you that does ring when something isn't authentic or something isn't true.
Yeah.
We really need to tune in and get to learn what that is, because both of us had that, somewhere in there, but we just didn't have the authority to question it at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Which is something that I've learned that we need to take back anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So your focus now, it sounds like, is on mental health. That is kind of your passion. And I think there are probably, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, there are probably many sort of named conditions that fall within the realm of mental health. But, I have in my notes that, you pose this question. It says, is depression or anxiety simply a symptom of multiple deficiencies? And so let's talk about that, because depression and anxiety are, I think, very common mental health disorders, things that people seek out medical attention for. And, as you alluded to, you have family members who were taking medications. I don't know if it was for depression or anxiety, but those are typical ones that people get medications for. That unfortunately is the kind of the only thing. When you go to a doctor, I have depression, I have anxiety. Okay, well, here's a pharmaceutical drug. And nutrition is never addressed. So let's talk about what kind of observations, what kind of aha moments have you developed over your work in mental health to recognize that nutrition plays a role, and what kind of deficiencies? And I assume in your question you're referring to nutritional deficiencies.
Absolutely.
What kind of deficiencies are you focusing on and seeing commonly happening?
Yeah, and I'm so grateful anytime I get a chance to tell anybody who's considering taking a medication or on a medication to learn more about this. And so I'm so happy we have this. I guess it started when I kept seeing so many people coming in on these antidepressants. And of course, I knew that there's a warning on them that is deadly and dangerous. And I knew that a lot of lives are taken by it. So I'm compelled to do something about it very quickly. But people get very sensitive when it comes to asking about that type of their mood and their depression. And I'm an absolute respecter of that. So I don't want to tell somebody that, they're taking something that's dangerous for them.
Right.
But I always ask a question. Okay, I see you're taking these medications. Tell me, how's that working for you? And I wanted to know. And once they would tell me whether it was working or it wasn't working, the conversation I like to turn to is, well, what is that drug trying to do, right? And when they start to know more about what they're doing to their body, then they start to become more empowered. And let's just take an SSRI, for example, right? A selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I said, okay, the goal is to keep more serotonin in the brain, right? That's the whole purpose of that drug and the whole thing it's trying to do to that. And I said, so why don't we figure out why you would need more serotonin? Like, are you not making enough serotonin? And if that's the case, then what do we need to do to help your body make up more serotonin, right? And then once you start to kind of go through the list of what it requires for your body to make it, that has to come from an external source, right? Essential nutrients like zinc and vitamin B6 and vitamin B3 and magnesium and vitamin D and tryptophan.
Tryptophan, yeah.
All of those, if you did a Google search for any single one of those nutrients by themselves, you would get research stating that there's a large percentage of the population who is deficient in any of those. So I would think it much wiser and safer and overall better for everybody if we first identified whether or not this was the result of the deficiency that's very likely. So we're following Occam's razor, right? And going, okay, this is actually more likely because so many people are missing in those. And guess what? Your body needs these nutrients for hundreds of other things. So let's use this as an opportunity to identify this is a symptomatic expression of your body looking for nutrients that it's not getting. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That is, completely like right in line with everything we teach here at NTI that, and certainly I just want to add the disclaimer here. None of this is medical advice, right? We're not advising anyone to do anything with their medications with the exception of just educate themselves. But yeah, I mean, I think because we know as nutrition professionals that every single thing that happens in the body, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of chemical reactions, happening at any moment in time, potentially. And every single thing that happens as a result of the presence of one or more nutrients, vitamins, minerals, even macronutrients, that we get from our foods.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so, it is only logical that if you are eating a diet that is deficient in one or more, and oftentimes it's more, individual nutrients, you are missing whatever role that nutrient plays in hundreds of different biochemical reactions. And that is going to have, cumulative effect. The more nutrients you're missing, the more impact there's going to be because all the nutrients work synergistically. And when you're missing, it's like a web. When you're missing one little piece of the puzzle, missing one little piece of the puzzle, other things are going to start failing. And it only makes sense. And so, that's what we talk about here. Like, let's look at the diet first and let's just evaluate, like, what's your nutrient status, right? It only makes sense. And it is, I still get, I don't know, surprised by the fact that these kinds of concepts are never really or very rarely addressed in kind of very mainstream, mainstream medical.
This is one of the reasons that really pushed me to talk more about it is I would have talks with medical professionals and I would mention nutrition and they would go, what does nutrition have to do with it? And like, it's an out there question. And so clearly there's this stigma we have to overcome, right? That all of this depression and anxiety. Now, I'm not saying that it's all biochemical, right? There are a lot of things that affect our mood. Absolutely. But if we're trying to address it with a biochemical drug, then we should definitely be looking at the biochemistry. Right. And before we go any further, just in case somebody's only watching this far, I want to make sure there's a very important thing. There's been a tremendous amount of research about all of these things. And there are nutrients that actually are associated with an increased risk of suicidal ideation if you take an SSRI.
Combined, yeah.
That nutrient is folate. A low folate biotype is so heavily associated with it through research on over 30,000 people over 35 years.
Wow.
that at the very least, please look at your folate intake. And what I mean by that is eat more black beans and asparagus. At the very least, if you're on an SSRI, just to protect yourself against that. And do a serum blood test for folate. See if you are a low folate biotype. That can be the difference between life and death for so many people. I just had to get that in there real quick.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. And then do you have an opinion on folate versus folic acid? I mean,
Oh, of course.
yeah.
I'm a whole food purist. Okay?
I pretty much figured you would, but I just want to throw it out there.
Yeah, I always want to give people the whole food version because there's so much more we get from food. And people tend to think of nutrition as supplementation always. You know, like, well, I take a multivitamin and there's so much to learn in that, you know, when you learn how a lot of these supplements are made, that's not how you would actually get it from food. And so it's an infinitely better delivery source. And this has been proven many, many times to get it from food. And so, yes, folate from food gives you all these other cofactors to help your body utilize it. Whereas anytime you're doing a monotherapy or a singular application, you run the risk of throwing things out of balance.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. We are right in alignment with everything here. All right. So I want to talk about a particular compound that we actually don't talk about in our program, but that I know that is a focus of yours. And so I'd love to hear you talk about lithium. I'm just going to let you go. Like, how did what arose your interest in lithium, and you know, what kind of research
I'll give you the
done,
whole
and where? Yeah. Like we don't have to do a 4-hour lecture here, but you know, give us your standard take on lithium.
First of all, when most people hear the word lithium, and I know most people listening right now are thinking lithium batteries, or they're thinking of the lithium that is in a medication.
Yes.
Because that used to be this stigma. People would say, oh, that person's not on their lithium, you know, so it became this horrible way of people casting a shadow on that. Now, to be clear, lithium carbonate. Now, the second name is very, very important. Okay. Lithium carbonate is an inorganic form of lithium, which is very hard on the body, but it is listed in the World Health Organization's list of essential medications because it is so effective for bipolar disorder. So that should alone have started us asking more questions about this. The problem is that people do see it as a medication. And the debate here is to say, well, wait a minute, this is a mineral, right? So what is it actually doing in the body? And why isn't it classified in the same category as magnesium or zinc or iron, right? The minerals that our body needs. And this is where we're at right now. And I've dived deep into lithium because I created a whole checklist of what I see as the nutrients that we need to make sure are present for someone to be able to make their own neurotransmitters, their own serotonin, their own dopamine. And if that's not fully checked off, you know, I need to make sure that we're looking at everything that's required. And lithium turns out to be really powerful for balancing neurotransmitters in the brain. Like I had no idea really that it helps clear excess glutamate from the synapse into the glial cells.
Wow.
Now, why is that relevant? Glutamate is the thing where some people get just so excited and their brain's just going so fast. It overexcites the brain. It can actually destroy some of the brain cells because there's just too much. And that's the person who eats MSG, right? Or foods high in glutamate, and then they can't calm down at night. They think too fast, they move too fast, they're doing other things. And lithium actually balances it. It doesn't push it low, and it doesn't push anything high. It brings things right where they're supposed to be. And what I've learned is it doesn't just do that for glutamate to help with GABA. It does it for dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin. So it was amazing how it's almost like an adaptogenic nutrient and how smart it is. Wow. But I in Texas here, there's a town called Mineral Wells, about an hour and a half away. And I'm a big advocate of getting your water from the earth, right? The natural balance of the minerals that it gives you. And they have one well that they label separately because it has higher than normal levels of lithium in it. And that piqued my interest. And I've worked a lot with that city because it's a wonderful city. And it actually became the wellness capital of Texas because of the work we did with them, which was exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were really instrumental in starting this research. There's research across the state of Texas, thousands of samples taken in all these different counties. And it was so consistent that the higher the levels of lithium in the water, the lower the levels of depression, suicide, and violent crime they had, which really starts us going, okay, wait a minute, is this an essential nutrient? Is this something that we need to calm our systems down? And this is replicated around the world, 3 different continents, 9 different countries. It's amazing, that correlation. But there's a huge distinction I always want to make here. The lithium in the water is the way that nature provides it for us. So our body's ability to utilize it is different from a lithium carbonate, which is the medication. And so the more I looked at it, the more I realized, okay, if we can find it in gentler, more natural forms, we can get it in much smaller amounts and still get the same need satisfied in the body. And that's where I started. And this is where I've really tried to make sure everybody starts having a better conversation about lithium and not making the conversation about the fact that it's a drug or that it's a battery.
So interesting. So, and first I'll just correct myself. I call lithium a compound. Of course, it's not a compound, it's an element, but
Right.
and elements come from, the earth. And so is water the only, like water that comes from the earth, is that the only source of lithium, or is lithium found in foods? Like certain plants take up particular minerals from the soil.
Yes.
Are there certain foods that preferentially take up lithium?
It's a good question. And in order for me to answer that, I always have to say, if the mineral is available in the soil, then it can get into the plant.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's curious because it's not, veterinarians know this. You can't have certain livestock in a certain part of the country because there's deficiencies of certain minerals, and they'll develop certain diseases. So to answer that, I can't say, oh yeah, black-eyed peas are a great source of lithium, unless we know that it's in the soil in that area. And that makes things a little complicated. But yes, definitely foods like beans and peas are going to be good sources of them. And this is another opportunity to also give the difference between an organic and an inorganic form.
Yeah.
In the soil is the inorganic form of these minerals, iron and zinc and lithium. We can't eat the soil and necessarily be able to process it and get it. The microbiome of the soil and the plant do this magic conversions, right, to put it into a plant in the form that our bodies can use it. And that, again, is all the difference. So I don't want to lose an opportunity to let people know that this is different from the medication. It's the food version, and your body's going to receive it differently. Now, one fun thing I just want to say about that is there's been a lot of study in India on the lithium in the soil and the different plants, because so many people there use chewing tobacco or smoked tobacco. They analyzed tobacco and they found that tobacco had 18 times higher lithium than any other food that they had examined. Now, this is really interesting because we always think about nicotine, but now we realize that people are getting a portion of lithium if they're actually smoking tobacco. So that could account for some of the calming effect that people get. In fact, I remember my friends in theater used to say that a cigarette's a perfect drug. You take it before the show to get your energy up, and you take it after the show to calm your energy down. So again, it's that adaptogenic piece of it. Now, I am not advocating smoking, right? I'm not saying
Not
chew
an
tobacco
for smoking.
It's actually not a good source because tobacco also chelates heavy metals like lead and toxic metals out of the soil as well. But it just so happens, I think it's curious to see that there's another combination of getting lithium into our bodies is actually having some type of a benefit. So yeah, there's a lot of peas and nuts and seeds are going to be good sources, but make sure that they're in an area that lithium's in the soil.
Right. So I am fascinated by this town that has high lithium content in the water. Are they like and maybe this is like too far afield in the conversation, but like in this town, are people drinking well water, and are they getting that lithium in their water, or is the municipal water system filtering it out?
I don't know if it's actually being filtered out. That's a good question. And I should actually ask them to examine the municipal water. But I know that they do bottle it directly from these wells and sell it in bottles, right? So I don't believe that the population is actually getting access to those wells.
Oh,
owned by this company called Crazy Water, because it goes back in the story, somebody drank from the well and they were no longer crazy. So they should have called it uncrazy or non-crazy, but it's called Crazy Water.
Huh.
But you know what, I speak with them regularly, and that's going to be a question I'll have for them, are they filtering it out in the municipal water, or are people still getting access to some of that? You would think they would.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. But of course, someone has capitalized on it and figured out a way to sell a product. So,
yes. And I'm grateful for that, because
sure,
nice for me to have access to it here, where I don't necessarily have lithium in my water, no matter if I had a well or not here.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. Well, very interesting conversation. And I think lithium is something that, honestly, I have put zero time and effort into researching, and have a very, very limited understanding of it, recognizing that there's something about it that has to do with mental health, but I didn't really understand all the mechanisms. And it's fascinating about the mechanism you mentioned, where it's picking up the glutamate. That's really interesting.
And beyond that, it actually is involved in growing new dendrites in the brain. It's involved in being protective against the brain. Denmark, I believe, did a huge study as well, but they're looking at the levels of lithium in the water and dementia and cognitive decline, and they're finding an inverse relationship there. So it's very protective against cognitive decline in general. And also helpful in reducing oxidative stress, because it does help detoxify other heavy metals. Things like mercury, it helps to detox from the body. So there's so many things. Now, I don't want anybody to think that this is the only thing that they should do, right? It's just another big piece of the puzzle, I think. But I do think it's a piece of the puzzle that deserves being at the table, because without it, it could be all the difference between life and death, because what I said about the suicidal thing. And that's really the first things I want to jump in and say is, every day I drive to my office, there's a billboard that says that there are 63, deaths every day from suicide, and it's actually double of that. And that's a call to action for me every day, to just make sure people at least have the option to know about lithium and the option to know about the folate. Those are two things that if we could do that, we could be saving, so much heartache and so much suffering just from this.
Okay. All right. So we've talked a lot, interspersed throughout our conversation, about, dietary strategies for optimizing mental health. Is there anything that we missed, or do you want to kind of encapsulate what we've talked about into one sort of recommendation about optimizing diet for mental health? Obviously, include folate.
Yeah. And I would say, I want to give you multiple reasons to include folate, right? If we look at the areas around the world where people live the longest and they have the lowest rates of obesity, heart disease, cancer, beans are a cornerstone for a lot of those diets. And, somebody said, well, I can't eat beans, it gives me gas, Well, that's more information that we need to work on your digestion. But what I would say is, if you can work in some beans into your daily diet, you're getting a very complex micronutrient profile, including folate, including zinc, including copper, including all of these little minerals that we need. And if you can find a way to just make that a habit, I think that would be one of the smartest things that you could do. And make sure, if you're introducing a food like that, give yourself a couple of weeks of doing it consistently before you write it off. Because sometimes nutritional deficits are so devastatingly low that one tiny little application of these beans is not going to make any, barely move the needle. So I always want people to try to really give it some time. When they're given medications, they're told, well, it takes time for us to figure this out. It could be weeks, it could be months. So do the same thing with food and be consistent with it, and just know that it's nourishing you. I would say black beans. I talk a lot about asparagus, because asparagus is one of the best sources of folate out there. And it's something that people, don't mind doing. And then the third thing, even though those are both kind of carb heavy things, is just reducing refined carbohydrates, right? There are some wonderful, wonderful practitioners out there who really show us the difference between a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet in mental health. And I know that we spoke earlier about inflammation being a huge piece that we need to address for people with mental health. And I would say absolutely finding a way to get good healthy omega-3s to help resolve the inflammation. Most Americans I've tested, thousands, have half of the minimum of what they need to be in a healthy range. So, and that is one thing that's been researched and confirmed in meta-analyses, that the lower the omega-3 intake, the higher the depression and anxiety. That's another one. So
Yeah.
I know I can't stop talking about this. It's so
No,
exciting.
it's okay. Yeah, it's good. So omega-3s, are you recommending fish or are you recommending flax?
Yeah,
Fish
good
or flax?
question. You know, I would really love to support the vegetarian community in their approach to health, but when it comes to omega-3s, that's a real challenge. It's very difficult. The conversion of the ALA is not efficient.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could suggest, and I would say this for anybody who's a vegetarian or vegan watching this, find a good algae oil. Algae oil is probably going to be the only way you're going to get there. And you're going to have to really make that a part of your life to do that. Everyone else, I say eat fish. Yeah, and make sure it's wild caught fish. Commercially raised fish is going to be higher in omega-6s and more inflammatory. It has to be the way that nature provides it for us. So it has to be wild caught from the ocean. There's a acronym I always tell people. It's let's see, how do I SMASH. So S for salmon, M for mackerel, A for anchovies, S for sardines, and H for herring. And when you eat the fish, you're not only getting the omega-3, you're getting protein, which you need for the tryptophan and the other things. And you're getting selenium to help with your own glutathione production to reduce oxidative stress. You're getting iodine, which is so missing in a lot of people's lives. So yes, fish is definitely going to be 5 days a week would be my target for people. 5 days is what shows to really get you into the healthy range. And that's what they eat in the blue zones, in the areas that are always on a coast.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Right in alignment again.
Passing the test so far.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So, any misconceptions that we need to clear up? I think an important misconception is what gets instilled in people from their medical providers, that what you eat doesn't matter. I think that's a big misconception. I've even heard people who say, yeah, I've got, some sort of gut, like IBD, they've got colitis or ulcerative, some sort of ulcerative bowel disease. And, oh, your diet doesn't have anything to do with it. It's like, if anywhere where the diet plays a major role, it's got to be in the gut, right? But still, I think that is one misconception that is delivered from, and I think in a misguided way, from the licensed medical community, because it's just simply not something, and, I don't think there's any malice involved or anything like that. It's just simply not something they discuss. We know that medical practitioners only get, I've heard as little as 3 hours up to as much as 3 days of nutrition training, and it's just not something that they focus on. And, there's that makes sense. They have a lot of other things that they need to learn. So I think that's one misconception. But any other misconceptions, even, misconceptions about certain foods that maybe can cause problems. I mean, I don't know if there are any, but I just want to give you the opportunity to mention anything.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to, just because I have the opportunity, and this might be taking a little bit of a risk saying this, but the misconception is that it's safe to take an antidepressant medication, because there is a black box warning on that drug. And that's there because the FDA had to put it there, because there have been so many deaths related with this drug. So you have to take a second to step back and go, yes, I want to trust this practitioner, but you have to verify. And unfortunately, over 80% of the prescriptions are made without a diagnosis, and they're not by a mental health care professional. So that should give us pause, right? To go, wait a minute, what tests are you going to run on me to let me know that I, first of all, need this medication and that it's safe for me? right? That I think that's fair for anybody to ask a doctor. And I think we have to. And I know that people are desperate and they really want, it's painful and it's suffering. And
Sure.
so they're looking for answers. And I get that. I just want you to make sure that you're looking at other answers instead of just the one that is being the easy answer for you, because that could cause, it's not safe. I'm just going to say it. It's not. You can't say that something with a black box warning on it is safe for anybody to do without testing, without further analysis, without a proper diagnosis, you know. And unfortunately, practitioners and they want to end the suffering in the person. So it's not
Sure.
I'm not blaming them, right? But that's
Absolutely.
the only tool that they've been given. Like you said, there's no education on that. And so they're doing what they can to try to end suffering, but their education needs to be more robust before being able to give that to people, I think.
All right, good. All right, well, let's turn to you and kind of, you talked about how you have some experience with your own sort of observations and aha moments in your own health, of course, when you were younger. And like, as you have matured and progressed in your life, do you find particular, dietary or lifestyle practices that you just would not go without doing, either on a daily basis or a weekly basis? Kind of talk to us about that, just to give us some personal
implying that I'm
perspective.
mature and progressive. I appreciate that. Oh, absolutely. The more you learn, the more you layer on things into your own life. And I would say that prioritizing sleep has become such an important thing for me. And it's very hard for me to decide when I'm working with a new client, do we start with your digestion or do we start with sleep? But it's always digestion for me, but with the steps to make sure that their sleep is getting in line, because that's where the healing takes place. And a habit that I have incorporated in my life is when I find something that totally resonates through my whole being as truth, I do set it as a daily habit to take a whole food, not any synthetics, not magnesium glycinate, not malate, not citrate, none of those, but a whole food magnesium before I go to bed. If you're looking for a nutrient that is most likely going to be missing from somebody's life, or they're burning it up, or whatever their diet is getting rid of, it's likely magnesium. And the more I have done that in my life, the better I sleep. So, but it has to be whole food, right? It has to be with all the other cofactors in there. It can't be a single form. That has been profoundly changing for me, because man, sleep is just, it's one of the most powerful medicines there is. And if you can't get it, it's miserable, as you know. I mean, I'm sure everybody's gone a night without sleep. So yeah, that's one. And then the things that I keep that on the left of my sink where I brush my teeth, so I never miss a night. And then the other side, I have my morning things that I believe are really important for me specifically. So that way I never miss them. They're right there by my toothbrush. And if you are brushing your teeth every day, then you get a pretty good chance of remembering those two things. So.
Yeah, nice, great. All right. Well, anything else that you want to bring up or talk about here before we come to an end? Anything that I didn't ask you that you really want to make sure to get out into the world in this venue?
Yeah, what I want to reiterate to everyone is that there's hope. And that's what most people need to know when they're hitting dead ends everywhere. Their reality, their belief starts to be that there isn't an option and there is no hope. And I want them to all understand that the reason they haven't heard of this is because there is no lobbying group for nutrition. There is no financial interest that's marketing these truths. And so we have to find, like you just said earlier beautifully, that we have to find ways to bring this truth to and discover it. And once you understand for yourself truly what truth is, it's a complete game changer. But I'll end with this. My friend said to me earlier this week, as I was helping her with her blood work, she goes, "Dustin, you know how many nutritionists it takes to change a light bulb?" And I said, "No, how many?" She goes, "0. The light bulb has to want to change." Right?
Oh, wow. Profound. Wow.
Right. And I say yes, but also as a nutritionist, I have to remove as many obstacles as I can to keep them from dismissing it as a possibility. And that's an everyday challenge. And the better you get at that, the more you can get the results. And it's so rewarding to have somebody finally step into that aha and have that experience with food. It changes everything. Yeah.
So many things that I could add to that. I want to add one thing. I think that our audience, and our community here at NTI of our students and our graduates, there are growing numbers who are interested in the mental health path because, I mean, the language is out there all over the place. We've got a mental health crisis in this country, and I don't know what the statistics actually show about that, but so there is more interest, and I think this is one of the paths that there is more apprehension about because just as you say, nutrition is not discussed, but particularly in mental health, I think nutrition is almost like, completely dismissed and almost hostility towards nutrition in the field of mental health. So to those of us, if I'm speaking to you directly, to those of us in our community of students and grads who are interested in using nutrition as a strategy to achieve optimal mental health wellness, you're in good hands. Dustin is forging the way for all of us, and really just keep learning, keep reading the research, because there is research out there. It just doesn't make it to the general
Can I offer a book
population.
that would
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
I offer this to every person who comes in. It's Dr. Walsh's work, and it's called Nutrient Power.
Yep. Yeah, I got that on my shelf.
And just to point out, and I turned right to it, he looked at millions of labs, and he says, I'll just, for example, zinc deficiency, he says, is by far the most frequently observed chemical imbalance in mental health populations. More than 90% of people diagnosed with depression and behavioral disorders exhibited low zinc. And so that alone, just showing a person that phrase in the book can make the connection for them and go, oh, well, do you think maybe I'm low in zinc? Well, it's worth ruling out, isn't it? Because you're going to need zinc for the rest of your life for a million other things. So yeah, this is a great starting point. And it's a great connection to the person who's struggling with that. I don't ever tell somebody to read the whole book. I point out that one phrase and say, read as much as you need to help inspire you. This is just one small, this isn't everything, right? But it's the beginnings of getting somebody connected to nutrition. In that.
Yeah, that's a great book. Thanks for recommending that.
Sure.
All right. Well, so tell us where people can find you, how they find you on the internet and all the other places. I don't know, all the other places.
Sure. Yeah. I'm currently building a YouTube channel. So I'm going to break down all these nutrients and how they affect mental health in a whole series in very small bites. And I find that's helpful also when, I have clients who need to hear it a few times so that it's recorded and it's with all the research in there for them. So yeah, Strong on Health. You could find that on YouTube, or strongonhealth.com is my website. And you can find everything you need through my website to get a hold of me. And anybody out there, any practitioners especially who are looking for some type of just a new angle or a fresh look at something, I'm always happy to work with a lot of healthcare practitioners across the country for that. And one last thing, if anybody out there is a veteran and they are struggling with with depression and suicidal ideation, I will see them for free. So anybody who is really at their wit's end, just call my clinic and I will talk to you over the phone as soon as I have an available time. And it's the phone number's on my website.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that work that you do, particularly with veterans, for free. And thank you so much for being here today. This was really an interesting conversation, and learned some things. I think our community is going to find it valuable to implement some of the things we talked about into their practices and into their lives. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep doing what you guys are doing. It matters and the world needs you.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you. Well, you as well.
thank you.
Alrighty. Thanks. Bye. Hi, Dianne Kaler here again. If you found this conversation interesting and haven't already become a student at NTI, check us out at ntischool.com. We hope to see you soon.